Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram at From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. We also have a Patreon page. It can be found at www.patreon.com/FromTheShadows. You can receive books, stickers, coffee mugs, and special content just for our Patreon subscribers. Check it out for yourself and see what packages that we have to offer. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started.
Hey everyone, this is your host Shane Grove, and before we get started with this interview with Jim Myers of the Sasquatch Outpost, we want to thank, I think maybe this is our first official sponsor, Jason?
Official sponsor?
We'll call. We get to do today's episode at Suburban Lanes here in Bucyrus, Ohio. Sean and Tasha Ridgway, the owners, were so gracious to kind of give us our own little corner of the bowling alley. So when you're listening to this episode of the podcast, and we mentioned it at the beginning, you hear some bowling in the background.
Occasional scream out or something, or somebody hit a strike or something.
Yeah, it's all part of the experience, and so if you get that itch that you're in North Central Ohio and you want to go bowling, make sure you come to Suburban Lanes.
They'll treat you right, and you'll have a good time.
They'll treat you right, and Sean and Tasha also are owners of Dillinger's Entertainment Center and Restaurant in downtown Bucyrus, and Breezy's Pizza, which for my money, Breezy's Pizza is the best pizza in North Central Ohio, in Crawford County, at least, and maybe North Central Ohio. So if you're passing through here, because I know we got a lot of Ohio listeners.
And there's a lot of pizza places around here.
There's a lot of pizza places.
So it's saying something to be ranked and for us to say that they are the best.
And if you saw my physique, you would know I'm an expert on eating pizza.
Same here.
So
we're neck and neck on that, buddy.
So we appreciate Sean and Tasha Ridgway for letting us set up shop here at Suburban Lanes. Make sure you check them out online and stop in and grab some food at Dillinger's. Come bowling here at Suburban Lanes, and check out this new episode we got coming up, because I think Jason and I can unequivocally say we were very shocked at some of these Bigfoot stories you're going to hear, and I think you're going to enjoy. And you might need to eat a pizza from Breezy's while you're listening. It might comfort you a little bit. What do you think, Jason?
Oh, I believe that there's something to that. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and with me, as always, is the super producer, Jason.
Greetings, everyone.
Hey, now, as we get it, we're coming from like a new studio here.
Oh, yeah.
We're kind of making a new home here at Suburban Lanes here in North Central Ohio and Bucyrus.
Absolutely.
Thanks to Sean and Tasha Ridgway. They've graciously opened the doors here and allowed us to kind of have a little studio here and to do the podcast from. So if you hear an occasional strike being thrown, or a curse as a spares not picked up. It's all part of the ambiance now here at From the Shadows podcast.
Or someone that strikes out completely and
this is a baseball. What are you talking about?
Well, you're right. It's not. I'm not a bowler, but I've seen some bowlers get pissed off. I'm usually the one sitting in the corner watching them do it, and I'm drinking a beer or something.
I don't know what that says about you, Jason, as a person.
I'm
you
just not a
enjoy the
bowler.
agony of defeat.
Well, they just get a little a little rambunctious at times.
Well, that's all part of bowling, man.
Oh, okay. All right, then. We'll leave that at that.
So are you going to tell the truth that you're back in the corner hustling people at pool?
That sometime happens, yes.
Okay.
But only make enough to get a full tank of gas and a pizza.
Oh, okay. That's fair. That's fair. Don't want to take advantage of people.
No, don't want to take advantage of nobody.
So joining us on this episode of the From the Shadows podcast is a super interesting guy. He is the owner of a store that I cannot wait to go out and visit, the Sasquatch Outpost in Bailey, Colorado, as well as the host of with a name like this, how can you go wrong? You Don't Know Squatch podcast.
Love that name.
Love that name. So joining us is Jim Myers. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you guys.
And we're so happy to have you on. And I got to say, me and Jason are a little jealous that you're sitting in front of a roaring fire out there in snowy Colorado. We don't like the snow, but we like the idea of being in front of a fire.
Well, let me put it this way. It's a wood stove, so it's not
Oh, geez,
a roaring fireplace.
Oh, you just ruined the whole thing for everybody.
Fireplaces are a waste of energy and heat, and nobody has them in Colorado. So,
Oh, geez. All right.
wood stoves are the way to go.
All right.
All right.
Well, that's for the energy efficiency part of our program.
There you go. There you go.
Yep.
So, Jim, how does somebody get into owning a store called the Sasquatch Outpost and having a podcast called You Don't Know Squatch? We got to hear this. How the genesis of this.
All right. Well, I'll give you the lowdown here. I've always been a Sasquatch believer ever since I was about 10 years old when the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek came out, and it ruined me forever.
That seems to be a common theme for a lot of like we're I think all about the same age, and that seems to be like the point where it kind of changed everybody's life when it came.
All of us believers, yeah.
Yep.
Well, that movie was kind of the first pseudo documentary ever made, I believe, about Sasquatch, and it was only 5 years after the now famous Patterson-Gimlin footage was taken in Northern California. So Bigfoot was still a relatively unknown phenomenon, but the legend of Boggy Creek kind of ended that. And so fast forward many, many years, a lot of traveling, a lot of working in different countries and things, where I wasn't able to pursue my interest in Sasquatch until we moved to Colorado in 2009. And in 2012, we started renovating this store that's now called the Sasquatch Outpost. The building that we took over was built in 1878. It's the oldest building in Bailey, and that's still standing anyway. And it was in terrible shape, should have been condemned. And we had the original idea of just starting a mercantile grocery store. And we did for a little while, but it took us 9 months to rebuild this store. And during those 9 months, two things significant happened. The first was I met my first Sasquatch eyewitness, and it was a gal who lived at the time just on the outskirts of Bailey. She managed a local lodge called Bailey Lodge, and she and her best friend were behind the lodge, maybe half a mile, just like May. I think it was early May They were out taking a walk because their best friend was going to leave the next day. And they saw a Sasquatch. It came running down the hill near them. They were walking up a hill. It came running down the hill little ways away. And they both saw it. They both agreed on what it was that they saw. And so I found out about this sometime later. I found out about it maybe in September or something. And I invited her out for coffee and heard her story. And I thought, this gal is totally sane, totally normal, was not looking for Bigfoot, didn't have any interest in Bigfoot. And her story fascinated me. And I totally believed her. And then about October of that year, the show Finding Bigfoot from Animal Planet came to Bailey to do an episode. And so I, of course, went to that filming. There was like 110 people at this meeting. I didn't know where they came from. I never saw any advertising for this town hall meeting for this TV show. But I went because I wanted to be on TV and I wanted to meet the actors. And about 7 or 8 people stood up at this town hall meeting and told stories about seeing Sasquatch in the general area around Bailey, including my friend Kate, my new friend Kate.
Oh, she was there and told, okay.
She was there. They came in large part due to her testimony, actually. Oh, I found out later. So met Bobo for the first time. I've gotten to know Bobo since then, but and Cliff Barrickman. But I told my wife after that meeting. Now, I took a little funny aside. We were already kind of building the idea of doing something around Sasquatch, even in our grocery store. So I had made this wooden cutout, like 7 feet tall, of Sasquatch holding a sign, just a 2-dimensional cutout, holding a sign that said, "I don't believe the evidence supports the existence of humans." And so they ended up taking that sign. I told the producer of the show about the sign. I brought it with me in my pickup. They ended up putting it by the front door of this building where they had the meeting, and they filmed it as all the actors walked in. They filmed this Bigfoot next to the door. I don't know if they still have it on that episode, but they did back then when they were showing it. So that was funny. So we decided, as we got ready to open this building and store, that we would call it Bailey Country Store and Sasquatch Outpost. And we were just curious to see what kind of interest we would get. It was a risk, I grant it, but we had a room in the back of the store that was kind of a converted storeroom that we had a few Bigfoot souvenirs, and we put a big map on the wall of Colorado. And people just started coming out of the woodwork. I don't even remember how it started, but people just started coming to us and telling us their stories of their encounters with Sasquatch. And we would put pins on the map. We've got the same map. It's an updated version of that map in the store now. And we have something like 300 pins on the map. So that's all from the last, well, probably since 2013 or 14. Eventually we realized the groceries were not going to cut it. We were going to starve to death. So we canned the groceries and went whole hog for Bigfoot.
Now that's ironic that the groceries were going to cause you to starve to death. But anyway, I don't know.
we ended up being the only ones eating the groceries. Nobody was buying them. So that's not why you have a grocery store, just so you can eat the groceries. Just if you ever decide to open a grocery store, that's a good sign that things are not going well.
You've completely deterred me from opening a grocery store.
But we never looked back. We since then built what is now called our Sasquatch Encounter Experience or Museum, and we've had over something like 45,000 people go through that, and that was built in 2016. We expanded it in 18. The store, we've expanded the store just about every year. Now I have no more room to expand it, really. But we have people come from all over the country and even all over the world to visit the Sasquatch Outpost. So it shows the incredible interest and infatuation people in this country, especially in the U.S., have for Bigfoot.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't argue with you because we have people. I mean, people listen to us all over the world, and you're just thinking, why is somebody in Australia or Iceland or Slovenia or wherever listening to us talk about Bigfoot? Do they really? I don't think there's any Bigfoot in Iceland, but of course, you know,
you never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, yes, people are definitely interested in stuff they don't really understand or can't just, you know, go see at the zoo or go see in a book or whatever. I mean, it's the mystery.
Right.
I think people love a good mystery.
Right.
Yeah, if it's unexplainable, I think people are interested in it.
Yeah. I mean, my boss at the post office is always interested in why it's so unexplainable that I don't get done in time.
I'm sure
So
he is.
He's always interested. I can't give him an answer. I mean, go on.
And the unexplainable,
The
right?
unexplainable. So you made the best decision you probably ever made to can the groceries.
It was.
And then, so now, is just your interest in Bigfoot because you live in an area where there's been a lot of sightings, or have you yourself had some experiences?
Oh, I've had many now. By 8 years later, I've had a sighting, and I've had many encounters where they were around me or in my camp, throwing things at us.
Well, for the people of Iceland and Slovenia that are tuning in, let's start from the beginning and hear about some of your experiences.
Sure. So the only visual sighting I have to date happened, I think, in 2014 or 15. I don't remember the exact year. And there's a very popular tourist destination about 13 miles from Bailey, and it's called Wellington Lake. It's a man-made lake. It's a gorgeous setting, you know, mountains. There's a huge mountain at the end of the lake called the Castle. It's just a big rock, a giant mound of rocks. And we've had tons of reports of visual sightings and vocalizations and footprints from Wellington Lake. So much so that the previous manager of the lake forbade any of his employees from talking about Bigfoot. He thought it would be bad for business. Oh. And there were so many people talking about their sightings, including people that worked for him. And he thought it would be bad for business, so he threatened them with dismissal. He was stupid because it would have been just the opposite. It would have drawn even more people
and he wanted
to that location.
And he wanted to open a grocery store. Let me guess.
He wanted to open a grocery store. Yes. So there was a lot of things happening at this location. So we went camping there as a family because it was a hot spot, and had a funny incident with a bear the night before my story happened. My wife thought she heard something rattling around in the campsite about 11, and she yells out, "Who is that?" And I looked out of the tent, and it's a black bear, and I said, "Honey, I don't think he's going to answer you. Even if it was a Sasquatch, I don't think it would answer you." But the next morning, I got up real early in the morning to go do some bowling. Got bowling on my head now. To go do some fishing. I fly fish, and everyone else in the camp was asleep as far as I could tell. So it was maybe 6 a.m. So I was out there fishing, and I'm always looking around when I'm out fishing or hiking or anything else outdoors. And I looked up, and there were some big rock outcroppings, maybe 200 yards above me up on the hillside. And there was something huge standing there looking down, uniform in color, did not look like a person. It looked too big to be a person. And I was staring at it. And of course, as luck would have it, a fish grabbed my fly, and I turned to look towards the fish, and I looked back up, and it was gone. If it was a Sasquatch, it was gone. I'm 90% sure it was a Sasquatch based on what it looked like and based on where it was standing. And that particular area is extremely hard to get to because it's so steep. I've climbed up there once, but it was quite a climb. And this was 6 a.m., so I thought, I can't imagine a camper standing out there on the rocks this early. Plus, it didn't look like it was wearing clothing. It looked too uniform in color. So since that time, I've been squatching more times than I can count, and with people that we eventually created a research team with called the Sasquatch Outpost research team. And our group has had many sightings within the group, some really bizarre things, but probably the first incident I had happen that was a close encounter was taking a couple out in the woods at night in an area where there had been 3 sightings in the previous 2 weeks. It was it's a camping area as well up here, but there have been 3 sightings in and around this camping area over 2 weeks of a large male Sasquatch. And so I went out to investigate one night by myself, felt extremely uncomfortable being out there, didn't have my gun on me, didn't even have a very strong flashlight. But this couple, it was 4th of July night. They came over to our house for 4th of July weekend, and they wanted to go out and do this. So we drove the 40 minutes or so to this location. We got there about 9 at night and headed in with our headlamps. And this was probably in June or July of 15, I believe. We got back into the woods. I asked them to sit down, and we turned off our lights, and we just listened. And I talked to them. I usually talk to Sasquatch when I'm out there. And there was nothing going on, no noises, no knocks, nothing. So we went a little further in, sat down again, and I got the feeling that I could hear deep breathing, and it was freaking me out. But I kept thinking, no, I'm imagining this. I can't be hearing this. And I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from. And so the gal who was with us told me later that she heard something as well, but she thought it was a plane going over.
It was that loud? It was that loud? They thought it was a plane?
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't hear any planes, but I heard what I thought was breathing. So,
oh wow.
Anyway, I told them I think it's time we head back to the truck. So we got up. Now there was no one else out there. It was about 10:30 now. No one else out. No one knew we were going there. So no one could have been hiding. It was totally a random event. We got part of the way back, and it was completely silent. There was no bugs, no night birds, just complete silence. And all you could hear was our steps on this trail. And all of a sudden, so it was me, the gal, and then the guy. And I told him, look back occasionally and see if you see eye shine, because sometimes I've heard that they'll follow people out. And so we're walking out, and I hear this loud, really loud crack behind us. And I thought the guy had reached up and grabbed a branch and broken it off. It was that loud. I turned around, and I yelled, was that you? And he was running the other way, the way we had come from, down the trail. And he wouldn't, and so I ran after him to see what was going on. And while I'm running after him, I hear another crack, and I hear a big thud. Couldn't see anything. Finally caught up with him, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he said, something threw something at us, and they hit a tree behind us. I said, really? I said, why are you running back here then? And he said, that was my first instinct. I said, it wasn't my instinct to go running towards the sounds, but he was freaking out. I mean, immediately afterwards, he there's a phenomenon that we talk about in the Bigfoot research world called zapping or sizzling. We think it's something that Sasquatch can do to you through infrasound or something. And often it's only one person in the group, but I think this guy was zapped because he would not stop talking. And we got back to our camp a little later, and he just circled the fire, and he wouldn't stop talking. So I finally just went to bed while he kept talking. And so something happened to him that night, but he said it hit about 20 feet behind him. He doesn't know if it was a rock or a branch, but it was very loud. It was thrown very hard. Well, there's only two things that can throw an object. That's people and Sasquatch. You have to have an opposable thumb.
Right.
So I've since had them do that more than once, throwing things at us. Never hit us yet. We've never been hit. I think their aim is impeccable, but they throw it for their amusement. They throw it, I think, to let us know they're there. In that occasion, I think they threw it to make sure we left. It was a time to go signal, I believe now. But if they could have hit one of us, it would have been catastrophic from the sound of whatever it was that hit the tree. It would have taken one of us out, probably. But many times.
So just imagine that, like the mental picture you just gave me of just Bigfoot's out in the woods, like, we're just gonna throw rocks at trees, just like humans would if you were like, walking through the woods, picking up a rock, picking up a dirt clod, trying to hit a squirrel, trying to, whatever.
Although at night, I think we would miss more than we would hit anything.
Oh yeah,
and
I think because
we had already passed
the Yankees
by,
would probably give Bigfoot at least $50 million a year to be the number one starter any year. I mean,
we had already, so it was behind us by 20 yards, so it was dark behind us when it threw whatever it threw at the tree. So it threw it in the dark and still hit it, and so that was probably my first close encounter. That was predated my sighting. Since then, I've been out in the woods hundreds of times. We've had numerous gifting sites outside of Bailey and lots of interaction with Sasquatch. My research partner had a sighting at our gifting area when he was on his own one day, but just had him push on the tent from the outside in the wee hours of the morning, like they were seeing what was inside the tent. Lots and lots of tree knocks. I've heard them talk. I've heard them bark, scream. Virtually every vocalization they make, I've heard at one time or another. So found lots of footprints. So it's been a fun few years since 2013 when we opened the store, and the level of interest. We have someone virtually every week that comes in to tell us a story. So
that was going to be my question for you. I was trying to wait because I was so fascinated by what you were saying. But my question was going to be, so with all the people that passed through this exhibit that you have set up, this whole tour and guiding system and all, I imagine you've probably heard some stories from some of the people that come through that have had sightings of their own and things like that, and they're just fascinated by the whole subject. I mean, they are. Yeah, I can imagine that right there. Probably would make the job so fun.
Probably 200 stories, I would think, by now.
Wow,
something in that area.
Well, let me ask you this, and you don't have to name any names or anything if you remember them. But what's a couple of the best stories that somebody told you that your jaw dropped that you couldn't believe?
There's several. One was happened to a friend of mine named Jason. I've been out squatching and camping with Jason, and we had a lot happen. The the incident where we had them pushing on the tent. I was with Jason that time, and we found footprints and marks on my truck and a lot of the things that same weekend, and we heard them talking the same weekend. But so when he was just getting started doing all this kind of Bigfoot research, he was out camping near, I think in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. And they had been out for several days. Nothing really had happened. And typically when we go out, what we're waiting for, everything is oriented towards nighttime in the campsite, because if you see or hear something during the day, you're lucky. Our assumption, which has been proven many times over now, is that once we come back to camp, we don't hesitate to make a lot of noise when we're in camp and play music and talk. Once we're all in our tents and things get quiet is when they will come into camp. And so just checking to see what we're doing, what food we've been eating, et cetera. So we were out camping, or Jason was out camping in this occasion in the San Juans. It was raining. This was their last night at that location. It was raining. I can't remember how many of them were camped there. A few, not just him. And he was in a little backpacker's tent. So, and he's a big guy. So the tent wasn't much bigger than him. And he had draped his rain poncho over the top of the tent because his rain fly had been ripped. So he was just trying to keep some of the rain off the tent. So he woke up 2 a.m. or something and heard commotion in the campsite, heard things moving around. Because it was raining, while it was raining, these things were moving around. When the rain would stop, everything would stop in the camp. Like they were waiting for more noise interference. So he heard them, whatever it was, open. They had a Dutch oven, cast iron pot on the fire. It opened the pot. He could hear it, open it. He could hear it put the lid back down on the pot, which a bear is never going to do. A bear is just going to knock the pot over and eat whatever's inside. This was very particular, about opening and closing the pot. Then he said it seemed like this thing became aware that he was awake. He doesn't know how because he wasn't making any noise. And all of a sudden it marched over to his tent, and he said he was about 30 feet maybe from the fire, and it felt like 3 steps it was there, just boom, 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 and it knocked over some wood that he'd stacked up outside the tent, and it was just standing there, and he knew it was right next to the tent, and so he's lying there wondering what's going to happen. So then all of a sudden, on one of the screens on the top of his tent was ripped, so it left an open space, which was part of the reason why he had his poncho over the tent. All of a sudden, this thing pushes its hand through that hole with the poncho in its hand, and it's kind of kneading the poncho in its hand. This is like a foot above his head, and he said the hand was humongous. And so it's kind of crumpling this poncho in his hand. Then it pulled his hand out, and it must have gotten down on all fours. And all of a sudden, it pushed its face into the side of the tent.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
So he said it was as big as the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket. And he said he could see the nose, the eye, the eyebrows. So it pushed its face in, and it takes a big sniff. And Jason has a .45 pistol in his hand, pointed right at its head. And he's desperately trying to decide what to do because he's thinking maybe it's going to kill him. And, it was a terrifying experience for someone who'd never had something like that happen, for anyone, really.
Right.
And so he's struggling. What do I do? What do I do? And he said something in his head, like he said it was an angel. He said it was weird. Something said to him, move your legs. And he said it felt like my legs were concrete, but he managed to shift his weight in the sleeping bag, and this thing literally went whoop, and pulled back from the tent and stood up. And he said by then it was just getting to be light. So he could see a big shadow rise up next to the tent. And then it made a call of some kind and started walking out. And he said he heard 2 or 3 more walk out behind it and left the camp. And he said, I am so glad I did not shoot that Sasquatch in the head. Whether it would have killed it or not, I would have been dead, because if it had killed it, he says the others in the campsite would have immediately jumped on me. I'm sure of that. So he endured that situation, but he's since named that Sasquatch. He's been back there many times, and he's encountered the same Sasquatch numerous times, and he calls him Grumpy because he's always in a bad mood, growling or complaining about something, and he behaves more aggressively than most of the Sasquatch that Jason's come into contact with. So that's probably the scariest firsthand story I've had. Another one recently, and then I'll stop after this story and see if you guys have any questions. But
I gotta rehinge my jaw, so go ahead. You got
okay.
Yeah.
A gal called or texted us through our website and said, I've had Sasquatch active at our cabin and even at our house. Please call me. So I called her up. She lives in Denver, I believe. And they have a house, a cabin in Tabernash, Colorado, which is near Winter Park ski resort. So, and they've had it for forever. And they've never had anything happen there like what I'm about to tell you happened. So last summer in July, she and her husband were up at the cabin. It's a very remote cabin. You have to go through a locked gate to get to the cabin. So it's highly unlikely that anybody was, passing by or whatever. And it's a long road to the gate and beyond the gate. And so they're way out there. They have no electricity. They use lanterns even in the cabin. They have an outhouse, I think, quite rustic. So they're asleep or about to go to sleep one night that they were there, and all of a sudden something smacks the side of the cabin really hard, and it woke them both up. And then the rest of that night was this terrifying incident of these things slapping the cabin, scratching really hard on the outside of the cabin. And they had their motion lights outside. No, they had a generator, I guess. They had their motion lights outside coming on and going off, coming on and going off. And whenever they would look out there, they wouldn't see anything. So that was the first night. The second night, the same thing happened again. They hit the window, and this gal said, I don't know how they didn't break it. They hit it so hard. And they were still scratching and banging on the sides of the building. And she got fed up at one point and went outside and yelled at them something like, leave us alone, we're trying to sleep. But it carried on. And so the third night, if I remember correctly, she was determined that they were going to get some sleep, and they knew what it was by then. They figured it had to be Sasquatch. So she has a pistol in the cabin, at least one. And at one point, the motion light came on outside, and she went out on the porch. Now, it takes some guts just to go out on the front porch when all this is going on outside. She went out on the porch and looked out in the yard where the light was shining, and there was a particular pine tree, and there was something standing behind it. The pine tree didn't even hardly hid anything because this Sasquatch was so huge. And it was standing behind this tree with its head up in the pine needles, and it was just staring at her. So she said, I'm trying to be the alpha, in this situation. I'm like, okay. So she's stomping her feet and puts her hands on her hips and yells at him, you need to get away and let us sleep. and she pulled out this pistol and she fired not at the Sasquatch, in a different direction. And she said the Sasquatch flinched when she did that. It definitely was not expecting a gunshot. And then she ran in the house, and she said it was quiet the rest of the night. They didn't come to the cabin. They didn't bother them anymore. So that gunshot must have accomplished what she wanted. Later, she reached out to Matt Moneymaker, who did the Animal Planet Finding Bigfoot show. And he said, I think they wanted food. That's why they were banging on your cabin. Maybe not. I don't know. But he hypothesized, and he may be right about this, that the big fires we had the last couple of years may have pushed the Sasquatch into areas that they were not in before. And maybe that was why they suddenly showed up and started interacting with their cabin and them. And, maybe they're hungry. Maybe they decided that humans are a good source to give us food. So, that's all speculation. But so this summer, I may go up there and do an investigation at her cabin. But, so that was very recent. That was a couple of weeks ago that she told me, and the incident happened last July.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I could only think of, and you might want to suggest this to your buddy Jason. You can go to any RV center and buy a nice trailer or a motorhome that you can go camping in, other than a tent. And all I could think of, and this is just, maybe, neither here or there, but people our age, when you said that he pushed his face into that tent, all I could think of was Fred Sanford telling Aunt Esther she was so ugly they used her face to make gorilla cookies. And then you said they called the Bigfoot grumpy, and I'm like, that's perfect.
Yeah,
maybe you should.
That's perfect.
Call the Bigfoot Aunt Esther. But that is I'm telling you, that is the scariest thing I think I've ever heard.
That would have been a very terrifying experience. How do Jason? That's just incredible.
He kept doing it after that. That didn't dissuade him from.
Did he invest?
Doing what we do?
Did he invest in adult diapers to take and start wearing?
No, he invested in a bigger tent.
In a bigger gun.
We tend to not stay in campers because you can't hear anything, can't hear as much in a camper as you can in a tent.
That is
and
true.
Our goal is to interact with them. So that's, we understand that there's risks there, but it's almost like Sasquatch have a code of conduct that, when you're in your tent, they don't bother you in your tent, and you kind of agree that you're not going to get out and bother them. My daughters often ask me when I have Sasquatch nearby why I don't unzip the tent and quickly look out. I said, because that'll be the last we'll see of them. That's kind of violates this code of conduct, if you will. And many groups now, when they go out, have a no light policy. So especially when you get to where you're going to camp, that there be no lights in the camp. And because that encourages them to come closer than a big roaring fire and lots of lanterns. And so, yeah, they're highly intelligent. Extremely intelligent. So I would put their intelligence as equal to ours, if not surpassing ours in some areas. And so we don't fool them, by putting game cameras out, for instance. Nobody, very, very, very rarely has anyone gotten any image on a game camera, because I think they know what a camera is. I can't tell you how they know that, but they just won't come in to a campsite.
They know it's not natural. It's not something natural.
They know it's not natural, and I think they can see the infrared beam that those things put out. And whereas an audio recorder, you can put those all over the camp, and they'll walk around and they'll vocalize, and they don't seem to mind audio recorders, and they seem to know the difference. All I can say, because a camera, that's it. You know, they won't come in once they realize there's a camera there.
So obviously then you're kind of in the camp of that these are creatures who really don't want to do us any harm unless they're pushed.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
I think, I mean, the jury's out. I'm considering writing a book on the two sides of Sasquatch nature. There's a benevolent side. I mean, the vast majority of encounters that you hear about are very brief. People see a Sasquatch and then it's gone. I've heard of numerous people being healed by Sasquatch of very serious or terminal illnesses. So there is this kind of empathetic, compassionate side, but then there's the other side and other stories of people being their interactions being violent with Sasquatch. Now, people who have violent encounters with Sasquatch, to be honest, probably you never hear about it because they don't survive the incident. If that kind of encounter happens, I don't think we would survive it. So,
there's nobody left to tell about this.
There's nobody left to tell about them.
Yeah.
There are the occasional stories of. We have a book we sell. One of the books we sell is a compilation of stories by different people about Sasquatch, and in this one book, there's a story of an elderly gentleman who was part of building or doing the logging for building one of the ski resorts, Aspen or Vail, I forget which one. So they were out in the woods for extended periods of time at the campsite where they could continue their logging. And they captured a young Sasquatch that had been raiding their food stores. Took 5 men to control it, and the foreman of the camp was apparently out at the time, and they wanted to find out from him what they should do with it. They knew they'd found something incredible, so they put it in a shed, an empty shed, and put big, huge logs against the door that it couldn't budge, apparently, but it was screaming bloody murder constantly. And so the guy that told the story was the first one on watch that night. And he said about 10 o'clock, the big ape, that's what he called it, the big ape came around the corner of the hut, slapped the logs out of the way like they were nothing, and grabbed him and pulled his arm off at the elbow and threw him against the shed and knocked him cold. And then it must have taken its young one and left. And thankfully, the camp doctor was able to keep him from bleeding out. But he told this story to a group of people in Boulder at a bar that got talking about Sasquatch. He wasn't part of the group, but he overheard their conversation. And apparently he had a missing forearm, and it was kind of crudely repaired. You could tell that it wasn't an amputation that was done in the hospital. It wasn't that neatly, finished off. And so, he was either a great liar or he had his arm ripped off by a Sasquatch. So, but you could say there was provocation. I guess.
Yeah, they took maybe that particular Sasquatch's kid and had him.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do if somebody?
Well, and it was screaming and screaming. So the Sasquatch knew right where it was, and
right.
This guy was the unfortunate one who happened to be on watch at the moment. So, so they can be violent. They certainly are powerful enough to kill us very easily if they chose to.
Right.
Which is why I'm very happy that the vast majority of encounters, human to Sasquatch, at least the ones we know about, are brief and peaceful. So they usually disappear so quickly that the people hardly even realize what they were looking at. kind of like the one I saw.
Now, what is your what is your thought on, the whole storyline about people missing in national parks? Do you think that
missing 411?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that is something that can be attributed to Sasquatch or Bigfoot, or is there something else going on?
It's a good question. David Paulides, who wrote that series of books, is a very good friend of mine, and we've talked about this numerous times, sometimes when we've been out in the woods together. But both of us, I think, David intentionally never draws any conclusions in his books. He just says the facts as they were when the person was found or when they disappeared, because he doesn't know. I mean, nobody knows for sure what happened, but you would think in many of these situations, some of the times the people are out by themselves hiking and they disappear, and you don't know what transpired at the moment that whatever happened to them happened to them. But there's many other situations where people are hiking with someone else or jogging with someone else or whatever, and one of them just simply disappears, just like they vanish into thin air. And you would think if a Sasquatch snatched someone, you would think you would hear a scream or, help or something, but it's almost always total silence. And that's why the person who survives says, I don't know what happened to them. I turned around and they were gone. And you would think they would have heard the noise of a Sasquatch coming and grabbing someone if that's what actually happened. So, but there's stories in Native American history about Sasquatch stealing women and children and food. And, I mean, there's anecdotal evidence that would say that they have taken people in the past, or maybe still do, I don't know. As like we were talking, if someone goes missing, it's interesting when people who've gone missing are found, sometimes their bodies are found. And they're found far away, 1 mile, 2 miles away from where they disappeared or farther. And sometimes all that the story will say, all that the law enforcement will give up is that the person was found in territory so rugged that a helicopter had to get their body out. And they don't say how they died. They'll say cause of death was consistent with where they were found or something like that. I mean, what does that mean? I don't know.
It's like double talk.
Yeah, double talk. And so, I want to know, did this person die from blunt force trauma? Did they, were they torn apart? I mean, what happened to them? How did they get where they were found? Because they didn't get there on their own steam. That wasn't where they were going, but that's where their body was found. So it's whether Sasquatch is responsible. I can say this with confidence. I know of no Sasquatch researcher that I know personally or even know about that's ever disappeared or had a violent encounter with Sasquatch. And there's a lot of us out there doing this. And so, you would think if this was something that happened all the time, it would have happened to one of us. And if it did happen to one of us, I'd probably stop doing what I'm doing. But, again, they seem to respect this unspoken code, and they don't. I mean, I won't say that they don't ever try to intimidate us by throwing stuff or making loud noises or even knocking trees down near people. But again, it's very different to have a tree fall 30 feet or 30 yards from where you are to having a tree fall on you. And I've never heard of anyone who had that experience and survived it. So.
Yeah, I mean, you talking the story about the guy having his arm ripped off, that's basically the first time I've ever heard of anybody being hurt by one, by it grabbing the person. you know. And
I've heard of other stories, but again, I've never been able to talk to any of those people personally. And if I do write this book, I can only write about firsthand, you know, I have to be able to track people down and get a story from them, because I'm not ever going to be satisfied to write about a second or third hand story, because you have that much more probability of that being untrue or unreliable. Whereas if I can talk to the person themselves, at least I can say, this is what I was told by the person this happened to. So it would take a lot of research. I'd probably have to do a lot of traveling to find people. Maybe I'd be surprised. Maybe there's more violent encounters than we realize. It's just people don't talk about it.
Well, here's what I think about that. I think we're dealing with a creature that is intelligent, for one, but I think that they have actually better senses than we do. They're more adept. We go out into the woods and we go squatching, but they live out there. I think they have a better sense of smell. I don't think they need to have an external light source, to like a flashlight or a camp light, in order to be able to see. And they're much more stronger than we are. They got ways of communicating that we don't have out there. I mean, I think if they really wanted to go after humans, there would be a lot more cases that we would know about.
We'd be easy pickings.
Yeah, easy pickings.
Yeah, we'd be
no
easy.
doubt.
Well, we would be, but already there's thousands of people. I mean, probably tens of thousands of people who've disappeared, and it was never known what happened to them, or their bodies were found, but it was never known what killed them. So I think there's far more incidences than we like to admit, which is why David Paulides always gets pushback from the Parks Board. They won't give him information about people who go missing in these national parks. And that should be a freedom of information deal.
Yeah, it should.
But they'll make excuses and say, well, we don't keep records of people who go missing in the park. Of course they do. The government agency.
Yep.
So I think they know. I know that the National Parks knows about Sasquatch. National Forest Bureau knows about Sasquatch. I think sooner or later, probably sooner than later, we're going to have another reveal, like the government came out recently about UFOs, that they've obviously known about them forever and have been studying them forever.
Right.
And I'm not sure why they chose to come out with that information right now, but I suspect the same thing's going to happen by some government agency, whether it's the Parks Board or National Forest Service, or somebody's going to come out and say, yeah, whether they were supposed to or not, somebody's going to spill the beans and say, yeah, of course we've known about Sasquatch forever. And I don't know if they'll say why they haven't come public with it till now, but there's all kinds of stories rolling around out there about people being in the woods and coming upon a team of armed military personnel who tell them to leave the area, and you know, stuff like that.
Or during that Mount St. Helen explosion, what supposedly happened with the military up there. Yeah. Yep.
With Sasquatch. Yeah.
Yep.
So being able to track these stories down is next to impossible, because people won't talk about it. But it's a big secret. You would think sooner or later somebody, maybe who's retired from one of these agencies, would admit, yeah, this happened. But I've heard of many, many, many rangers who talked about their own experiences with Sasquatch. So I know they have those experiences. It's just publicly, as a government agency, they don't exist.
Yeah, they don't talk about it. They will not relinquish
now, it's interesting.
That information.
There is a national forest in Oregon, very large national forest, that is tracking Sasquatch, and I've seen a photograph of their questionnaire for their Bigfoot sightings among particularly their wildland fire rangers. And it gives all kinds of questions about where they were and what the circumstances were and was anyone else with them. And it says on the top of the form don't bother submitting joke reports. They will not be entered in the database. So they obviously have a database. They are keeping track of Sasquatch, but until someone gave me this photograph, I'd never seen anything that gave proof that there's anything official going on, but apparently there is, at least in one national forest.
So that national forest is, this is a report for their employees to turn in?
Their employees.
Okay.
They're
okay.
Forest Service personnel. It's in Oregon. And so the picture was taken by the daughter of another researcher friend of mine who was working there at the time, and she saw this form, I guess, and has the watermark of that Forest Service. And so if one is doing it, there has to be more. There has to be more tracking Sasquatch.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's too many people that have too many. It's like the UFO thing. You get to a point where it's almost a joke to deny or to not come out
right
and say.
Right.
You lose more credibility by denying it than you ever would by coming out and admitting that, yeah, we know about it. But,
well, and I think they came out because they had so many Navy pilots in particular that had stories that, after a while, it's like, we can't keep hiding all this information.
Well, yeah, like in the Navy pilots, when you have when the own government, the flight that's taking place is the one that records the UFO.
Yes.
You can't deny it. It's not like me or Jason standing out there getting something on our cell phone. This is
right.
And then it took 13 or 14 years for them to even come out with that. So
right. And we probably know just a fraction of what
certainly
the info they actually have. So
yeah, right.
Certainly. I mean, so what ultimately, as a Bigfoot researcher, what ultimately do you want to have happen, or what do you want to accomplish?
Well, I would really, I want to have a close encounter or several close encounters. I think I do. Until this happens where I have a real close encounter visually, I'm not talking, because I've had many close encounters, but where they choose to show themselves at close range, I would like to see them, to try to communicate with them. There's a number of other researchers in the country who are trying some crazy things like sleeping out in the woods in open cots and in anticipation of having interaction with Sasquatch. And I think that, there's a lot of opinions between all of us. Unfortunately, this Bigfoot community is a very divided community, and between probably those who would say Bigfoot is purely flesh and blood, relative of Gigantopithecus or something, or the woo side, which would say no, they're more than flesh and blood. They're interdimensional. They disappear. They do all these other things. So if all of us, regardless of our perspectives, could pool our combined information, we'd probably be way further along in our research. But everybody seems to be very territorial about what they're doing and what they've discovered and where they're having experiences, and it's a funny community.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Research community.
You know what you saying that reminds me of is listening to one of these serial killer podcasts where in the 60s and 70s these guys were committing all these crimes and all these different agencies had all this information, but they wouldn't share it with each other. And if they just had, they
would have caught them way sooner.
They would have caught them a lot sooner. It's like this arrogance of, I'm not giving you my information and stuff because I want
to be the one that catches them, or
But here's the thing: is number one, you're not catching them. Okay, what you guys are doing, you're not going out with the intention of catching one and bringing a specimen back. It doesn't even sound like you guys are trying to catch one on film or anything. You just kind of want to have the experience.
Right.
And even that is not going to prove to the majority of people. That's just your story, your own experience, what you know. And because, if you took a picture or took a video, people are still going to try to debunk it anyway.
But when we have enough researchers out there with giving empirical evidence of them having experiences and everything, I mean, it will eventually, the truth will come out. I mean, it's going to make sense where it's going to be more popular to believe that than would it be to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in many ways, there's so much evidence out there for Sasquatch being real. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's 50 to 70,000 sightings that have been documented over the past probably 50 to 60 years. That's a whole lot of people to believe are mistaken or saw a moose or a bear and thought it was a Sasquatch. We're not that stupid. People are not stupid, and that's what we get accused of is, well, you're just seeing bears standing up or whatever. No, that's not what we saw, and it insults people's intelligence to be told that.
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of people don't want to say anything.
You didn't see a bear standing on that little outcropping.
No.
So like you said, all it was is either and so what's the odds then that you look away and a person decides they're going to disappear at the minute you look away?
Well, and if it had been a person, it was maybe 2 or 3 seconds at most. They would have had to turn, and they would have still been walking back into the trees, which were maybe 30 yards behind them.
Yeah.
I would have seen them walking back. But I looked back, and it was literally gone. It just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And so we have numerous people in our research group that have actually watched them disappear. They had their eyes on them when they disappeared, and it just kind of dematerialized into nothing.
That's just extraordinary.
It is, and these are totally credible, believable people. They have no reason to lie. In fact, if the story is not true, they're doing themselves a lot more disservice by telling it, because people are going to think, okay, not only do you believe in Bigfoot, but you think that they disappear.
Yep.
You really are out there. I mean, there's something wrong with your head.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jim, do you want to tell everybody about the podcast you guys do, the You Don't Know Squatch?
Yeah.
podcast?
So You Don't Know Squatch is a brainchild of myself and my co-host, whose name is Joshua Cantu, and Joshua is a skeptic, so we go back and forth a lot. And we interview a lot of eyewitnesses. We also like to talk about whatever's in the news about Bigfoot, or we review Bigfoot movies, and we've hardly ever found anything worth watching. And
we're trying to change that for you, just so you know. We're trying to change it.
Yeah, well, we're working on a movie as well. So
nice.
I hope that people will tune in. You can find us on YouTube, but also on Google Play, Apple Play, wherever you find podcasts. Just look up You Don't Know Squatch, and we'll be there.
All right. Now let's talk about the store and how people can find the store. And I'm assuming then that you had the wherewithal to get rid of the grocery part. You certainly have the wherewithal that people can order stuff online.
Yes.
And buy.
Yes.
Okay, because this is a cool store. So I wanted you to tell everybody how they can go and check you out.
So we have an online store on our website, which is sasquatchoutpost.com. And if you go to that website, there's a button for shop now, and we have over 1,100 items in our store, online store, that you can buy. And so T-shirts, mugs, magnets, stickers, everything you can imagine. I tell people who come into our physical store that in the store part of the outpost, we like to have fun. It's all tongue in cheek. I design a lot of our merchandise because I have a background in graphic design. And so, I have a sign that says, danger, Bigfoot breeding area, avoid eye contact and things like that. And Bigfoot doesn't believe in you either, et cetera. But once they cross from the store into the museum is we're all business. We're trying to educate people. So much of what we have in our physical store is available in our online store. But if they make it to our location in Bailey, Colorado, I hope they would have time to go through the Sasquatch encounter. We're in the process of having built a new exhibit that's going to be an adult male Sasquatch and a juvenile Sasquatch, and the male Sasquatch will be animated, and they're being built for us as probably not quite yet, but we're going to pick them up in June and bring them back to the outpost and build this new exhibit, which should be a game changer for what we're trying to accomplish, because it's going to be very realistic. So we're excited about that.
That sounds wonderful.
Other than going, I don't really want to go camping out there. It sounds like it'd be worth the trip.
Oh, I want to go.
Yeah, of course you do. You're crazy. I mean, you're one Aunt Esther sticking her face in the side of the tent to make gorilla cookie. I mean, come on.
Well, I'll say this. Where are you guys located currently?
In Ohio.
In Ohio, Central Ohio.
You are?
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
We need to talk some more, because Ohio is where I'm going to pick up the Sasquatch.
So you did, because you and I had the discussion about the animatronic, and I was trying to figure out where that might have been built. So you did find...
we did find a company in Columbus.
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's about
it's about an hour away from us.
45, 50 minutes.
Okay.
Hour away from us.
And actually, what I'm trying to do this summer, there's a Bigfoot Adventure Weekend at Salt Forge State Park.
Yep.
In June, first weekend in June, and I'm trying to work with this company to see if they can get the Sasquatch done by then. And I'll drive out there with a flatbed trailer, and we'll pick them up, and we'll go to that camp, and have this unveiling as being part of the event of that weekend for the people at the Bigfoot camp, and then we'll drive it back to Bailey. So it'll be. We're planning on building a big crate to put these two Sasquatch in, and having painting on the outside signs like warning Sasquatch in transit, stay back or whatever, and make it an event.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. That'd be fantastic. Especially if you can get the crate to move a little bit.
Put somebody in there with it to move it a little bit.
I'll have a recording that is motion. When somebody approaches the crate, it makes noise like it's trying to break out or something.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I used to have a sound effect like that in the museum, but I had to turn it off because it scared kids too badly. So,
it's good for them. Builds character.
Yes.
Well, Jim, hey, we so appreciate you coming on with us, and
you bet.
You told some great stories. If our listeners didn't love this episode, I don't know. You don't know Squatch. That's all I can say.
That's right.
So.
Well, you guys have been great. I appreciate the time.
Yes, it has been fantastic. So everybody, go check out the You Don't Know Squatch podcast, and then get online and buy some Bigfoot stuff.
Yes.
Come on, buy some Bigfoot.
There's tons of it out there.
Yes.
Tons.
Yeah. And if you can't find what you want at Jim's, maybe you can come to the From the Shadows store. We got some coffee mugs.
There you go.
Yeah, we got a little bit there, but we can't compare it with what Jim's got. We got a few things.
Okay. So thanks, Jim. It has been awesome. And,
you're welcome.
Hopefully we'll get to come see the unveiling, and we'll make sure that all our listeners here in North Central Ohio get over there and check it out too.
Oh yeah, we'll start promoting it ahead of time. Definitely.
Awesome.
So, well, thanks a lot, and stay warm there in Colorado.
Appreciate it.
Try to at least.
Talk to you guys next time. Yeah.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right.
You take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.